like I think when you start talking about this, or you start thinking about it, because I know I've had this same thought. It's like, well, I don't want to be a doormat,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
well, so
Exactly.
won't this just mean I'm just going to let people walk over me all the time, right? Like I'll just let people just, they just get to take advantage of me, because that, I just want their flourishing, and they're good, right? So
Hmm.
therefore, like basically the best thing I can do for them is just let them win all the time and I lose,
Exactly.
right? I was
Exactly.
like,
Exactly.
well, what if you're thinking that way? Look, you still haven't figured it out. You're still in the line in the sand mode, right?
Mhm.
And two, like, is that really the best for them?
Welcome to the Circle Dwellers podcast, a production of the Protestant monastic order of Life Mission Fellowship. This is a show about living out the gospel in an intentional Christian community. My name is Matt Krell, and I have to apologize for my voice as I got sick this last week. So hopefully I don't sound too nasally here, but thankfully I have my co-host Timothy Krell here to compensate as well. So hopefully we'll both sound well enough after the sickness we both got. Anyway. Right. So, good morning, Tim.
Morning, Matt.
So for today's topic, I thought we'd talk about the name of the podcast. Like, what is circle dwelling? Because that's definitely a very technical term for us here at Life Mission Fellowship. But it is a rather fairly profound one, I think. So I thought figured we'd just talk about that and what is the concept? How did it get started?
Yeah. So circle dwelling is a term that was coined by our abbot, uh, yours and my father. Is that
Mm-hmm.
the grammar on that
Yeah?
always confuses me.
Which word do you
And
put
then
first? Yeah, it's always the I goes at the end. I know that. So,
and then Kate's gonna watch this and then tell me, yeah,
that's
I
true.
got the grammar wrong.
Don't criticize
Kate's
us
my
too
little
strongly, Kate.
grammar shoulder angel sitting next to me, yeah, making me think about what I say. But no, so yeah, so Dad came up with that phrase quite a while now ago, and has done some sermons on it and everything. But it's um, something that's kind of come into the zeitgeist of our fellowship, of a way of understanding how to live together. And you have this in kind of any community, but there's kind of a special, um, something special in a community like ours, where we're so tightly knit, and involving so much of our lives together, where you end up creating these cultural kind of phrases and ideas that kind of help you gel and become cohesive, and are stand-in for a whole host of ideas and thoughts and everything. And I don't know, that process of how that happens in communities, and like, how important that is, has always been kind of interesting to me. But circle dwelling is one of those for us, and one of those phrases that we use a lot, and what we've named the podcast based on. And basically, it's the circle dwelling is in contrast with the very well-known metaphor of a line in the sand, right? So when typically people have opinions and thoughts and desires, and those do not always match.
Yep.
Most of the time they don't match, in fact. And so something needs to happen to resolve that quite often, right? And the line in the sand metaphor is one that we, as humanity, English speaker humanity, use quite often. And that's for expressing the idea that I have my opinion, and I'm not going to go anywhere unless you cross this line. I'm drawing a line, and you can come over to my side of the line and agree with me and do the thing I want, or we're through, right? Or else I will have to go cross over that line, right? And give up what I want and submit to your idea, right? And usually generally when you draw the line in the sand, you say, yeah, it's my way or the highway, essentially, right? Like this, I'm gonna die on this hill. Um, and so circle dwelling is supposed to be what the alternative to the line in the sand negotiation. Right. And so instead of that line being between you and me, what if that line instead encircled you and me?
Right.
And right.
We were
And that's kind of, and I think it's a quite clever idea, the way Dad's framed that, right? Take that line between you and I, and now make it surround both of us, right? And what does that change, right? So the problem still exists, right? Like we, just by moving the line, we haven't changed the problem, but we've changed the position of both of us, right, in relation to the problem. Before, the problem was dividing us, right? That line in the sand was the issue, and it creates a division between us. But when you look at it as a circle, the idea is that problem can still be there. It's outside us, right? We're standing inside the circle, but our position is we're united in dealing with that issue.
Right.
We're united in wanting to come to a solution, right? That difficulty is not something that inherently divides us. It's something that inherently unites us and makes us be able to come together and face it, right? And so the idea with circle dwelling is that we stand in the circle together, look at that issue and say, okay, the first principle is that I'm committed to you and you're committed to me. I want your good. You want my good. We're together. Now, let's figure out how we solve this problem, right? What needs to happen in order for us to continue together. And that's what we mean by stay in the circle and circle dwelling, right? Is anytime we're able to, an issue comes up and we have that division between us, we shift our perspective, instead say, okay, we're not going to approach this like it's a line in the sand that one of us has to kowtow to the other or we go our separate ways. Instead, we are together, we are one. Now let's face that issue together and figure out a solution. That's what circle dwelling is.
Yeah. And I think people intuitively understand why this is a very Christian concept. But I think what makes it a little bit more unique, as well as a little hard to grasp immediately, is that it's not exactly the same thing as compromise. Right? Because a compromise is still in that line in the sand model. It's more just you're giving concessions to the other side without, while still being on either side of the line, right? But this is not saying that. This is saying the problem exists outside of us. It's not between us. So whatever solution we come up with solves both of our issues, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's important because people understand the idea of compromise, but that's not the right way of thinking about it. You want to think about it more like we're going to together as a team attack this problem and come up with a solution that works for both of us instead of just giving up something on either side.
Yeah, precisely. And it's also compromise when you're in, if you want to have, as Colin Gunton describes them, relations of mutual fellowship, right? Which, he has different categories for kind of relationships you can have. There's relationships of manipulation, relationships of rights and duties, and then relationships of mutual fellowship, right? As a church,
isn't that Brummer?
I'm pretty sure it's Gunton, but maybe you might be right.
I believe Gunton may have said it, but yeah. I don't know. I don't
No,
remember which theologian
I
we're
might just
talking
be.
about. I know
Forget.
what you're
Yeah,
talking
let's
about.
see.
It's just
Is yeah. I'm going to hang my. I think it is Gunton. I did a quick Google search.
watch as we proceed to spend 10 minutes to clarify an obscure name for
But
none of
maybe
our audience.
I really want to look this up now. Yeah, interesting.
Is it
They
Gunton?
both. Which one of them actually coins those terms? We'll
Okay,
have to look
I
at.
don't know.
We can do a
Whatever.
follow up.
You can figure it out yourself. You can tell us in the comments.
It's one of those two. You should read both of them because
Yes,
they're
you
both
should.
very good. So you can't go wrong if you read Brother or read Gunton. But anyways, what was I saying? Okay, yeah. So anyways,
Right.
they're
Relationships
from one
of
of those
fellowship.
two highly esteemed theologians. They have this idea of rights and duties, manipulation, or mutual fellowship. And what we're going for is mutual fellowship in our relationships as the church, right? So if you want to have those, compromise isn't really an option. Like compromise is okay in rights and duties, where we're more disconnected from each other. There's certain expectations that are set, and if they don't, then we go our separate ways. But when you're committed to each other in your whole life, right, as we're supposed to be in the church to our fellow believers, then compromise, is just not an option. Like, because what does that mean? That just basically means like, oh, I'm going to give up something that I don't want. You're going to give something you don't want. And then, and we're going to go for this lesser thing. Right. And like, there's nothing wrong with that in certain contexts, but in the context of where we're living for each other and laying our lives down for each other, it's not a compromise for me to give up the thing I need to give up in order for you to flourish. Right? Why would I look at that as a compromise? That's just like what needs to happen, right? Like, in other words, like when I see what need, in other words, my main goal is to love you, right? To seek your good. That's my main goal. So if me getting what I want, right, interferes with that in a way, right, and like is going to like that's going to cause something to not work, right, in our relationship or whatever, then I don't want that. Like it's so like that it would be a compromise to hold on to that. Like the end goal is for your flourishing. And so like when like because the compromise paradigm, right, essentially says there's something mainly that I want, and then I'm going to give that some of that up. Like I won't, like I've been selling a few things on Facebook Marketplace recently, right? Someone will come in and give me a low ball offer, right? And I might accept that because I just don't, I want to get rid of it now, or I don't think I'm going to get a better offer from people, right? So I wanted this bigger amount, but I'm willing to accept less, right? So the goal was, so my goal stayed the same, right? Which was, get, $100 for this thing, right? And instead I only got part of my goal, which was $80, right? But that's when we're in the circle, we're circle dwelling. That's never the goal. The goal was never $100, right? For me. The goal is something else, right? And it's much larger, right? It's actually embodying the kingdom of God. It's being, it's being Christ to my brother and sister. It's helping to him find joy and life and flourishing, right? So that's the goal. So I can't, like if I have to do something different than what my first preconceived notion was of how to achieve that goal, that's still achieving the goal. It's the goal, is our life together and shared fellowship. So that's kind of what that circle dwelling thing is meant to do, is shift that paradigm. Because if you're still in the, no, my goal is to make $100, right? Then that's not what it is at all, right? But if my actual goal, right, is like, like say this thing that I'm selling is like a 3D printer or something, right? And my actual goal is like, I really want to see you flourish in your hobby, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it'd be nice to, I spent a bunch of money on this thing, like,
Right.
well, really, like, the thing I really care about is I really want you to be able to succeed in your hobby, right? So,
and from the
if I get $60 for it, if I get $50 for it, I'm still like, I'm really happy about that. I may even if you're like, oh wow, I just do not have any money for it, I might just give it to you as a gift then,
Mm-hmm.
like, or that kind of thing. And so it's the shifting of the goal, right? Is when you're in that line in the sand paradigm, the goal is, how do I make sure that I get everything that's coming to me, right? Like, how do I make sure that I get the maximum value out of life and don't get shortchanged, right? And the circle dwelling says, let's I'm changing that. I don't care in one sense whether I'm getting shortchanged. I can't be, because I want your good, right?
Mm-hmm. And
at the same time, go ahead.
But in your example with the 3D printer, right? The person who's receiving the 3D printer, buying it off of you, he wants your good too, right? So he would want to give you a fair price for it, because how much money you spent on it, right?
Yes.
So it goes both ways. It's not like it's all just one direction. It's not like a win-lose situation, like, to use like the Covey metaphor. The point is that both people are directed towards each other's good.
Yeah, exactly. And the flip side of it, like you were saying, that describing that other direction to it, is it's like, I think when you start talking about this, or you start thinking about it, because I know I've had this same thought. It's like, well, I don't want to be a doormat, like,
exactly.
Well, so won't this just mean I'm just going to let people walk over me all the time, right? Like, I'll just let people they just get to take advantage of me, because that, I just want their flourishing, and they're good, right? Mm-hmm. So therefore, like, basically the best thing I can do for them is just let them win all the time, and I lose, right? Exactly. It's like, well, what if you're thinking that way? Look, you still haven't figured it out. You're still in the line in the sand mode, right? And two, like, is that really the best for them? Is it really the best for their good and flourishing if you allow yourself to be a doormat?
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
So now, no, it's not. It's just not good to let people walk over other people. That's not if they're doing it intentionally, that's really not good. If they're doing it unintentionally, they don't realize it, that's also not good, right? And
because you're a human being too, right? Like, you have value under God, right? And it's good for the other person to recognize that.
Yeah, well, not just recognize it, just because, like, again, that the goal of being in the circle, right, is not your flourishing or my flourishing. It's our flourishing, right? And there's a wonderful depth, right? It's not. I always find that when you're hitting on the right theological understanding in Christianity, it's like it's never just the left side or the right side, and it's never just like, oh, a compromise between those two. It's this third way. It's yes to both, right?
Right.
It's the fullness of the truth, right? Where it all comes into play. And so it's the yes to both of us. We both need to be flourishing. We both need, and that's the project that we're both in here, right? And so, yes, at one level, maybe it is a compromise for me in that I have to give up something that I wanted, right? But that's not my highest aim. It's that my highest aim is that we flourish, right? And also, we aren't flourishing if I'm just letting myself be a doormat, right? As well. And I'm doing a disservice to our fellowship if I allow myself to be, right?
Right.
And so it's this nuance. It's you're making me question myself now when I'm going to say references of who says that. I'm pretty sure Eugene Peterson says middle voice, right?
No, I think you're right on that one. I think you're right on that
cool.
one.
We need a real lifetime chat GPT here checking.
The rest of the church in here correct their mistakes.
Chat GPT will hallucinate and tell us all sorts of wrong things. But so it's middle voice. It's not being just the driving force in the relationship. It's also not being just the passive submissive voice in the relationship too. It's going back and forth. It's a dance. It's all of those wonderful metaphors, right?
Right.
And so it's not something that you can boil down to like, oh, so in which situation should I give up what I want and get, it's like, again, that's not
right.
You're still in the wrong paradigm here. Like you can't, it's not going to work out like that. It's situational. It's depending on a lot of different things, and you have to work it out together.
Right.
And the way you're going to do that, there's no rule, there's no heuristic that you can use and then bring up to the person and say, haha, see, rule A, B, and C says I should win in this situation, right? Like, sorry, it doesn't work like that, it's about being able to give each other grace and love and space. And that's what love's all about. Love is about sacrifice, right? And it's figuring out where and when to sacrifice well for the other person. So that's the essence of the circle dwelling concept. And it's something that we keep reminding ourselves of because it's not easy to do.
It is not. I think probably should just clarify something for the audience. We mentioned this a little bit earlier, but before I derailed us about the name of the theologian coining the term, but it's important to note that this concept applies in one specific area of life, and that is relationships of mutual fellowship. And what that means is the people you are committed to and closest to, that's like your family. Right. The people you're saying, like, no matter what happens, I am here for you. I'm taking care of you. It's that kind of relationship. Right. It doesn't apply to the guy who's checking out your groceries at Walmart. Right. That would be a relationship of how does he put it? Rights and duties. Right. This relationship is defined by essentially a contract. Right. Like, I do this for you. You do this for me. Nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly fine. But that kind of relationship isn't appropriate within the family because family is about love, and love requires mutual fellowship, right? And then the third option, by the way, just for completeness sake, is a relationship of manipulation, that's the relationship you'd have with your chair, right? Right? Like the chair has no will in this, right? I can move it and control it however I want, right? And you absolutely don't do that to humans at all because we're made in the image of God, right?
Or shouldn't, rather. We definitely
you
do,
shouldn't.
But
exactly. You shouldn't. But right, so the circle dwelling concept is not something we're going to like build the entirety of society on as this political theory, right? And we're all now this giant kumbaya thing. No, that's sorry, you can't immanentize the eschaton. That's not going to happen. Jesus has to come back first. But in the meantime, the church is meant to be a foretaste of the coming kingdom, and that's what it should be built on, is those relationships of mutual fellowship.
Yeah, exactly. I think I will say too, like, that's also not to say that if you're not in that context of the church and body of believers or family, that you can just throw out the principles of circle dwelling and just like, oh, okay, well, I'm dealing with the teller at the grocery store.
I can just be
I don't have to be in circle dwelling mode now. Like I can just can be a jerk, you know. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
And I'll say too, like those circle dwelling, you can start in the circle dwelling mode, and that actually can be very, very useful and a blessing, right?
Sure.
To people. Because why not? Like, you know, let's look at the problem as not being something that's dividing us, or whatever that is, right? You know, let's look at it outside of us and see if we can work on something that,
right,
you know, is more than compromise, right? Like it's everyone's stolen it from Covey now, but synergy, right? That term like is used all over the place. But it's you know, the way he talks about it is very useful. In that, you know, this idea of let's make the sum greater than the whole greater than the sum of its parts, right? Try to find that solution. Oftentimes you can, but the difference between like true circle dwelling is there definitely is some kind of line in the sand where we will part ways, you know, like if the, you know, in the rights and duties that we have or whatever, at some point, exactly. You know, if this isn't working out for either of us, it's good and right that we do part ways, right? Like, you know, like in a business relationship, you know, all those kind of things. But when you're in the church, when, you know, this is circle dwelling's all we've got, you know, like we can't go, if we go the other route and regress to a rights and duties, then we've stopped being the church, right? And, you know, something's broken in the relationship, and that's, so it's kind of like, it's all or nothing, buddy, you know, like we've gotta work this out, because it's not an option, right? It just like, you know, for Christians and divorce, you know, the Christians, it's supposed to be, okay, it doesn't matter how rocky this marriage is getting, divorce ain't an option. You know, like we're gonna figure this out come hell or high water, right? And same with this. That's the beauty of the circle dwelling, is that okay, I'm taking that option off the table. It's not an option to just me to win or you to win kind of thing. We need to work on this together, right? And we succeed or fail in this together. Whether that's, you know, is something as trivial as who's going to sign the car out today to go into town, or, you know, is something much, much bigger, like, you know, a decision about, you know, anything about life direction, business decisions, all those kind of things. Yeah.
I think it might be helpful if we try to give a practical example to our audience how to do this, because like I said, this is hard. This is not an easy thing if you've been in the mode for a long time. And it's even for us who've essentially grown up with that model our whole lives, like it's still not easy, right? Like the human heart is deceitful. But one example I was thinking about was like two bachelors living in the same apartment, and one doesn't clean the dishes, right? So
this sounds like this might be, it may
or may not be inspired
real
by
world
events that happen in my life. Yeah. So a line in the sand mode would be like nagging the other person to do their dishes, right? Or complaining at them, and But, you know, that line in the sand mode would also be like just doing it for them and being grumpy about it, right? Like you said it.
Yeah.
But a circle dwelling mode would look at why he doesn't do his dishes. It could be that he doesn't have time in the morning to do it, you know. So maybe the solution there is maybe we dedicate a time in the evening when we're both free to just blow it out together. Right now it's getting done super fast because we got two people on it instead of one, you know. See what I mean? You're looking at the problem together, right? And in that case, you know, sometimes the solution is maybe there's just one guy who has to do it and you just rotate or something. Who knows?
Yeah.
But the point is, you're looking at the problem now, not at someone's behavior necessarily, right? It's not, the problem isn't that you're not keeping your end of the deal. The issue is something that's making it difficult to get the dishes done, right? That the problem is the dishes aren't getting done.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, and I liked what you were saying. I would just like to shine the light on that a little bit more about like the idea. A lot of times the first thing someone will think of when they're trying to understand the concept of circle dwelling or how to live that way, right, is like, oh, well, that just means then that I would just wash his dishes, right?
Right,
And not,
exactly.
make a big deal about it, right? And again, that goes back to, it's like, okay, no, that's not circle dwelling necessarily, right? Now there's a situation where it's like, okay, I'm just going to give him grace. Yeah, I'm making too big a deal about that. But in this situation, like, you're not getting closer and you're not becoming tighter in your friendship if you're just masking that difficulty from him and saying, from your roommate, and not letting them know, hey, this is a real issue for me, right?
Right.
You're also holding something back, like you're removing an opportunity from them if you don't actually even have that conversation. Like, say the situation ends up being, in the end, you realize, yeah, I'm just making too big a deal about this. It really isn't a big deal for me to wash those dishes in that circumstance, right?
Right.
You can like do that privately and come to that conclusion and move on, right? That's usually a much less, not as rich an option if you just have the conversation with them and allow you both to get to that conclusion, right?
Yeah.
Right, which is that you talk to him and say, like, it really annoys me that you're not doing dishes here, and can you wash them, or can we figure out something, right? And then he talks with you and he says, well, I don't think it's really a big deal. Can't you, it's like, I only do it. That only happens like once a month on this weird day when something comes up and I'm late, or, or whatever it is, right? Like, if it seems reasonable, and then you've worked on that together, right? And you can say, okay, you're right. I will set that aside for our friendship because that makes sense. We're in unity on that thought, right? Now you've become closer through that process, right? Versus it's like, oh, I'm just going to keep it to myself and fix it one way or the other, right? And it's like, well, that's not a relationship, It's like, you got to talk to people, you got to work things out. So but also, so if it's going to be that you're just going to cover it, it's much better if it can be, okay, but you've talked about that and they've known your desires, and that process was something you did together versus just by yourself. And then also, it may actually be, as we were saying, like, it might not be loving to him to just simply say, I'm going to cover that for you.
Right.
He needs the opportunity to love you by being able to share and sacrifice and change something in his behavior to make your life better, right? That's a gift that you can give someone to be able to love you, right? That's, there's a way that you can be in life where you never want to allow people to change or do something for you, because then you might see that as like, oh, now I'm obligated to them or something, right? And you can keep people at arm's length that way.
Yeah, exactly. It's tough, right? Like, your pride gets in the way and makes you think that someone bringing up an issue with you is like an attack on you, right? But it's not.
Yeah.
If it's loving, it's not.
Yeah.
And even if it is, you can still treat it as if it wasn't, right? Because it's probably still a problem anyway, right?
Yeah. And that can be a whole nother thing that you need to talk about, which is like, hey, when I bring things up to you, you kind of take it like an attack, and I'm not attacking you, I'm just saying, I'm just expressing my preference that I'd like to discuss, Yeah, there's all sorts of I think we could do quite a few more discussions on other relational patterns, I think too, I guess maybe another question that might be worth thinking about is, I think you might come and think, okay, well, that's really great, but like, I don't know if the other person is on the same page. Do they, you know, what if they don't want to do circle dwelling, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, that's going to be difficult. You can still do it, right? And there's still a right way to be. That's still loving. It doesn't mean you just throw out all those principles. But you're right. You kind of both do need to be, you know, to have this goal, which is we think circle dwelling is the right way to be, right? And you can keep working toward that. But if the other person isn't on board with that, you're not going to get very far. That's why we have this idea of circle dwelling, because it's something that we are like, this is a big deal for all of us to be on the same page on, right?
Yeah.
Because if we decide, you know, if someone, you know, if someone doesn't want to do circle dwelling, they probably shouldn't be here. You know, like that's because it isn't going to work out. You know, like and if you don't want to do circle dwelling, you shouldn't be trying to be, you know, in the church the way God is calling the church to be, right? Like that's, and just got to, yeah. So it's unless, so this is, you know, and you should, like, if you want to do circle dwelling, you should try to get on the same page and check in with other people and say, like, we're all thinking about this, right? We realize that, you know, as Christians here, we're supposed to be trying to do circle dwelling, right? You don't have to call it circle dwelling, but this, you know, this idea that we, you know, there's a lot of other theological terms or ways of calling it that you could use, right? But you probably want to get that up front and figure it out, right? Because that changes the nature of the relationship. Just like you don't want to get married to someone and then find out, you know, oh yeah, I don't really think that divorce is a big deal,
right?
And you know, I'm just kind of into like, let's just try this for a few years and then see how we're doing, you know, kind of thing.
Yep.
Or you know, I think, you know, we shouldn't. You know, they have a very different conception of what love is and sacrifice in terms of marriage and all that kind of stuff. You want to figure that out first before you say I do, right? And so, yeah, you want to and need to find people who want to do circle dwelling, but you should try to do circle dwelling with people who want to do circle dwelling. You know, if you try to do it with people who don't want to do that, that's not going to work out well.
You can only go so far in a relationship.
Yeah.
The other person has
but
to.
that's not to let you off the hook to say, well, I can't find anybody who wants to do it with me, so I don't have to do it. You know, like, no, the Lord's calling you to find those people. Like, you know, like, he definitely wants you to find those people, right? And you know,
by
like,
you practicing some of that, you may find that other people start doing it too back as well.
And absolutely, yeah. And it's you know, it's growing.
Not a guarantee,
you know,
but
it's the
possible.
Yeah, just like marriage, when you say I do, you don't actually know everything you're signing up for. Right? Like there's no, you know, there will come a point where you will legitimately be able to say, I was not expecting this. I didn't think about this problem, you know, like that was going to come along with marriage. But that's the beauty of the marriage vow, is saying, okay, yeah, whatever those unexpected things are, I'm still in it. You know, it doesn't matter what you throw at me. And that's the same with the circle dwelling thing. Is like, you might not realize, oh wow, I didn't realize it means this. Like, I have to, like, I'm having that all the time. Like, you know, of just like a new understanding of the depth of like, oh yeah, okay, I've been kind of selfish or living, in a not pattern of mutual fellowship in this area. But I have a commitment. I know that circle dwelling is right. That's what we're called to as Christians. So when I see that, I'm going to change and shift and learn it, you know. Yeah.
We still don't know how to end these podcasts, but
that's
a pretty good place to end it there, I think.
I think so. Yeah. Okay. Hopefully this gives some context to everybody about what the name of the podcast is, and helps give you a framework to continue to grow in loving and sharing life with your fellow believers.
And feel free to use the jargon in your own church, by the way. Like,
oh yeah,
it doesn't have
it's
to.
not
It
copyrighted.
doesn't have to be with us. Right? Like, we think it's a good term, right?
Yeah,
it's pretty useful. Right. Oh yeah, something new. I figured out how to turn this into a podcast. So this is on Spotify now, and you can rate it on Spotify. So go do that. That would be really great if you could do that. We would really like that.
Yes, please do.
Anyway.
Yeah, and also like and subscribe on YouTube and all the other stuff. And you know the spiel.
So right, and hopefully things will just work. We'll see.
Right.
We're still figuring this out, but I'm pretty sure the power of friendship will be able to overcome whatever technological challenges. All right, I'll stop making cringy jokes here. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.